this date, I'm going to start here by looking at my watch like you told me not to. It's the 4th of March 1991. We're here at Lane Place. My name's Bob Wernle. I'm representing the Historical Society, and Claire Chamberlain's here from the American Legion. And our cameraman, like the last time, is Ed Miller, who was also in World War II. We're going to interview today Bob Campbell, who's sitting here next to me. I assume it's Robert Campbell, right? And he's a native of Montgomery County. And first of all, what was the date of your birth?
May 18th, 1920.
1920? Mm-hmm. Well, you were a young one going in then.
I wasn't all that old.
Well, to somebody who's went in when I did, well, you were young. Now, Bob, you're a native of Montgomery County. Where were you born?
East of Crawfordville on 32.
Uh-huh. And was yours a farm family here?
Farm family, and my father also had a gravel pit, operated a gravel pit. He was a livestock feeder.
Mm-hmm.
Cattle.
And you went to Montgomery County School?
Went to Smartsburg my first 8 years and finished up in Crawfordville High.
Mm-hmm. What year did you get out of high school here?
1938.
And you're married now, or are you?
I'm married now. Got married June the 6th, 1941.
Okay, and in other words, you're married to the same woman you were
Same
married
woman.
to when you went in the service.
Right.
Now, you got out of high school in you said
38.
38. And you were married right after that, or soon after that?
In 41.
And who was your wife? What was her family name?
Janice Pyle.
Pyle?
Pyle.
P-Y-L-E.
P-Y-L-E.
And she was a native here too?
Yes, in the last few years she was born in Putnam County. Moved up here as a youngster.
Did you have any children?
We have 3 children.
And are they around here now?
My oldest son teaches school out at Northridge, lives on the farm out there with us, and daughter is a surgical nurse at Fort Wayne, and I have a younger son that played sports at North that is in Taiwan as a minister.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, you probably then were drafted shortly after you got out of high school, or not too long after.
Well, it would be January 9th of 42.
And so that was just a few days after Pearl Harbor, just
A
about
few
a
days.
month after Pearl Harbor.
I knew when Pearl Harbor happened that I'd be long gone.
You were drafted.
But I was drafted.
When you went off to the service, do you remember assembling with a group and where they went, and where did you go?
Well,
Walter Spencer was chairman of the draft board at that time.
oh yes, and of course we went to the downtown armory at Indianapolis, and from there I sent direct to, that's when you went over, and if you passed you went on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went direct to Fort Leonard Wood.
That's the names of the engineers.
And it wasn't quite finished, and it was nothing but mud in the winter time.
Uh-huh. Do you remember going through the reception center? Was that there at Fort Leonard Wood? Being interviewed and that sort of thing?
I don't remember that part, no.
And did you go through basic training?
Our basic training was cut short, 11 weeks, and I was headed north to Alaska.
And what kind of an outfit did you go up there with?
It was an engineer regiment, which we worked on in the Yukon on the Alaskan Highway.
Going back to your basic training, do you remember anything about that? What did you find it kind of tough in the engineers?
Oh, when suppose. Of course, I'd kind of been around construction. I remember mostly
Crawling under barbed wire with them shooting over you?
crawling under barbed wire, of course, but it wasn't, the camp wasn't completed, and that old Missouri yellow mud hung on your boots.
And tell us about up in Alaska. How long were you there? When did you go up there?
We got up Skagway, I think it was around the 1st of April. They took us up to Whitehorse, that's in the Yukon.
How did you get there?
By ship. Went out of Oregon,
Got out to Oregon by train, I suppose.
out the train from Fort Leonard Wood.
Remember being on the troop train?
Oh yes.
What were the conditions like on the troop train?
Well, it put 3 men to a double seat, and you rode that way all the way out there.
Did a double seat, you didn't have a bunk, you didn't have a berth?
No bunk, no berth, no nothing.
Sat up all the way?
Yeah, there wasn't no bunk set up. You take turns.
Do you remember, did they black out the train at night?
They blacked her out, yes. Pulled the curtains.
That was back in the early part of the war and they were doing that.
Right.
Now you got up to Alaska by ship and you said you landed at Skagway?
Landed at Skagway, and that's where the old gold miners went over, from Skagway to Whitehorse, which Whitehorse is in the Yukon.
Yeah.
And
Isn't there a train goes up to Whitehorse?
they've discontinued it now, but there was at the time.
Did you ride up on that train?
I rode up on the train, narrow gauge. It took 8 engines to pull 20 cars up over the hump.
And were you all military on it?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I happened to be one of the first of 50 of one platoon that rode the paddle wheel riverboat from Whitehorse up the Yukon to Teslin Bay, which is
What's the name of that bay?
Teslin Bay.
Teslin, how do you spell that?
Tistin.
Oh, okay. And what was your rank at that time? Were you still a buck private?
I was a buck private.
Earning $30 or 27, 21?
21 a month.
And
Paycheck after insurance was $13.48, right up here.
now, when you went up to Whitehorse, and where'd you go from there?
We went up the Yukon River, 5 days and 5 nights, come back up the Teslin River, which this paddle wheel boat had never been up that way, but the Army said they could make it. And we finally did by winching ourselves up, but I couldn't get off the boat. We pushed a barge ahead of us, couldn't get off the barge till they took our axes and cut some timber down.
It was a paddle wheel, was it? You said?
It was a paddle wheel, and it's still sitting as an antique at Whitehorse now, up dry docked. And they fired up the wood, 4-foot sticks of wood.
What was your mission up there? What were you doing?
They put us in the center where the road would start, and we started north and south in virgin country, cutting out 50-foot right-of-way for the Alaskan highway.
So you brought a bunch of equipment up with you?
Later on, each company ended up with 18 D8 cats and 14 D4s.
How long were you up there?
I was up there a year and 3 months, whatever that date comes out to.
And what kind of a camp were you in? What described the camp? Were you in tents or?
Tents, pup tents.
Pup tents, sleeping on the ground?
On the ground.
Uh-huh. Got pretty cold up there, if you were there.
Yeah, we were still sleeping on pup tents at 40 below before they got brought up sawmills and sawed out and just built those shacks.
Did you go through a winter sleeping in a pup tent?
No, it was 40 below though when we got out of them.
Uh-huh.
Took 50-gallon barrels and made stoves, welded them together, and just put up sawed by wide lumber and made tar paper shacks. And then as they dry out, you had a detail and stuff that cracks full of moss, just like the Indians did.
Uh-huh. You were still, did you get a promotion anywhere along the line?
I ended up, we had some heavy equipment here on the gravel pit, and I ended up in charge of the heavy equipment. I become a sergeant right away, one of the first in the company, I guess.
And did you, one of the interesting things I think about, at least on my own experience as being an enlisted man, did you make any good friends when you were up there with your platoon that went up? Did you make any lasting friendships? For instance, fellows you still see today or hear from today?
Not in this group, because before they came back, they were still up there when I, later on I can tell you, I got sent back to the States and left them.
And where did they send you?
I come back to Fort Belvoir,
Virginia.
Virginia.
Do you have any idea why you were sent back?
Yes, I'll tell you a joke. We got up there and that was desolate country, and I wanted to come home, and I run around with a fellow that was a shyster. I could tell him that.
You don't mean a lawyer, do you?
Yeah. And he kept saying, our company commanders kept saying, I'd like for you two guys to go to OCS. No, not interested. Well, he called me one day. He said, I'll tell you what, let's do. Let's sign up. Send us back to the States, and you'll get a 30-day delay en route. And the first week of OCS, we'll get ourselves kicked out. And I swallowed that. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
So I told my wife I was going through Chicago and for her to meet me there. Well, she didn't show up, but this fellow's wife did. So 24 hours I went over the hill. I come to Cartersville.
AWOL.
AWOL.
Did you get busted for that?
No, the only thing that made us late at OCS, and we didn't have to work the 2 weeks. We got kicked out the first week.
That was at Fort Belvoir.
Fort Belvoir.
That's the engineers OCS.
Right.
Yeah.
But it did turn out good. They sent us over to one of these recruiting regiments, and the captain there was a West Pointer, and he said, boy, you two guys have sure seen a lot of this world. He said, why don't we just put you up in the squad room there, and you'll be your own boss until we get orders on you. Fine. So I went to him and I said, say, I'd like to have my wife come out here. Fine. So this fellow come back with us. We was there 3 weeks, and our wives was with us 3 weeks. But then I got orders to go with the outfit I went to England with. They was in the staging area.
Where was the staging area?
Miles Standish, New York.
New York. And how long were you in the staging area?
After I got with them, just 2 days. And they loaded us on and took us to Nova Scotia, Halifax. one ship, one of the Queen ships.
Well, you went across on the Mary or the Queen Mary or what?
Muritana.
Muritana. Yeah, okay.
It's counted one of the Queen ships, they
Mary.
say. But 13,500 on it.
And just sleep down in the steerage?
They put 500 to a room. There wasn't much sleeping to it.
Yeah.
Hammocks.
Hammocks.
Staggered.
Yeah.
5 deep.
Mm-hmm.
And dear old British, they fed us twice a day. They sent us
Mutton.
squad leader down boiled eggs.
You took showers in salt water?
Never had a shower.
Okay.
You know better than that.
I went over and we had showers in salt water.
Well, the ship I went to up north with had shower water.
Yeah. Where did you land in England when you got
Liverpool.
Liverpool? Same place that Marion Kirtley landed.
It was about, I guess, which I really don't know, it was about the only dock over there at that part of England that they could go clear in.
When was this that you landed in England?
Now, bear with me, it's sometime in October of 43.
October of 43. Well, that kind of squares with what Marion did. Where'd you go from Liverpool?
Well, I'll tell you where they dumped us. I forget the town. We'd been on this ship 5 days and 5 nights. And at that time, there's just 650 of us. At that time, we were the only ones issued paratroop boots, but the paratroopers. And they dumped us in a little village beside the 101st and told us to get acquainted. And we did.
Now, describe your unit. What did you do? This was an engineer battalion, was it?
It was an engineer battalion converted to a specialty battalion.
Now, what's a specialty battalion?
Well, they do a lot of different things. They train kind of like the Rangers, but they're mostly demolitionists.
Going in and try to defuse mines and that sort of thing?
That was the main thing, along with heavy equipment.
Were the mines in those days different from the mines that you see today in, for instance, the Persian Gulf business? What were those mines like that you were working on?
Well, we tried to practice. We had some German mines we practiced on. We didn't learn them all until we got to France, of course, but the Teller mine.
What's a Teller mine?
It's a tank mine, 12-pound TNT, and the Bouncing Betty, which they had in Persia, is a 6-inch well casing, 3 prongs sticking up. A man steps on it and charge blows out in the air about 10 foot, and then it explodes with pellets, staples or nails.
Had you had experience with those down in Fort Leonard Wood or
No,
Belvoir?
no, none whatsoever. No.
You learned that all after you got over there?
Yeah, over in England.
Now, what kind of training do they put you through over in England?
Long forced marches. And once a week, as I said, we was amphibious. Once a week, you'd get on landing craft, go out to sea, and come back in and practice landing.
Now, are you down on the southern coast of?
Ended up at the first few months we practiced out of Swansea and Cardiff, Wales.
Way down to the tip, toward the tip.
And the last 2 months we run out of Weymouth and Portsmouth.
Or came closer up.
came down.
Okay. Now, what kind of training was that? What did you say you were out of there? What were you doing?
Well, later on, it was mostly either forced marches or at sea on these landing craft.
Would the landing craft just go out and then you'd go a little ways and come back in?
You'd load on possibly late evening, you go out for 3 or 4 hours and go up the coast and land. They had 2 or 3 special beaches up there we landed on and practiced.
And were there enemy aircraft around, or did you see any enemy action?
Well, not particularly on our maneuvers. Every day there was planes over, especially at night, but they kept getting fewer and fewer. But up in central England, they hit about every night. Mm-hmm. The time we landed at Liverpool was completely gone.
You mean they had bombed the place out?
The year before, they had bombed and burned it out, yes.
Or what, you mean this, when you got there, it was flattened?
No, just skeletons.
Mm-hmm.
Steel skeletons there at the docks.
Did you then, I take it you're bringing us up through about the early part of 44, was that about where we are now?
Yeah.
44?
Yeah. I might say one thing, all these maneuvers and everything, our code name was Guinea Pig, Force O.
Guinea Pig what?
Force O. They had three outfits over there doing that, but Guinea Pig Force O.
Force O.
Force O, yes.
Force O. Oh, okay. What was the number of your outfit? What?
348 combat engineers.
And
5th Engineer Special Brigade, what we were, the nucleus of.
And you were still a buck sergeant, were you, or had you been promoted?
No, I was a platoon sergeant then.
Uh-huh.
Now this battalion was a specialty, I say. They made 12-man squads, 4 squads to platoon, and I was platoon sergeant. They had 4 sergeants and 4 corporals under them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, long and before this Slapton Sands thing happened.
Did you know about Slapton Sands when you were there?
I was in on it. I was young. We were on,
okay.
they had put the whole units together that was going to make the assault landing for the last big maneuver. And I don't know where I was at when they'd hit, but it was long in the middle of the night. I think they sank maybe, I don't know how many, 2 at least LSTs. But what was kind of serious to our group, after we landed, the next morning, those bodies began to float in, and we buried them on the upper beach. And
now you're still back in England, though.
This is in England.
Yeah.
This is in, now, actual dates slip me, but this would be in, it was the last maneuver we had, which would be possibly close to the last of April. And our battalion had the dishonor of digging a hole in where we buried them fellas. Mm-hmm. And they called us all in that was there. This never happened. And Doc Kirtley probably told you it never come out much till 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Forget it. Well, things went on and some of us did forget it, but I think 3 or 4 years ago, it come to them there in England or the military, and they had a little something over there, and they ceremony, and they dedicated that beach back to them. But I didn't count bodies. I don't know.
Were any fellows from your outfit?
No, no. It was out of one of the other groups that they put with us.
Now, what kind of a boat was it that caused all this havoc? You know?
Not for sure.
Did you see the?
Well, it's so dark. It happened at night. I presume a German PT boat. You could, because there were several of them type running around.
They call them E-boats.
E-boats over, but that type of boat, I think what it was. There were several of them come out. We wasn't too far off of the. Now remember, this is 45 years ago. We wasn't too far off of the harbor of Cherbourg, in that general area between there and the Shetland Islands.
All right, now we've got you on your exercises down there. And this was sometime in April, you think?
I judge it was last April, 1st of May, right in there.
And you went back, you were still, where were you at this time? Plymouth or at?
We were still at, we
Swansea?
were outside of Swansea.
Okay.
Sometime the first week, 10 days of May, we moved outside of Weymouth. That's Weymouth and Portsmouth were the big
naval base.
big bases were.
And how did things change when you moved? Or were you aware that the time was approaching, you're going to make a... Did you know at this time that that's what...
Oh, sure. There was a few of us, and there was a few of us even knew the code name. But yes. I don't think even you can understand the assault force. That's the group that actually goes in first. And after it gets rolling, you can't tell one from the other. But the assault force, which what we was with elements of the 1st Division and the 29th Division, that's what was practicing all this time, is for the assault forces to go in. And yeah, we knew. And we even had some maps. We knew
Where you were going.
where we're going, yeah.
You mentioned beforehand that you went over ahead of time to France. And tell us about that. When was that?
That was before this last maneuver, sometime in the middle of April, I suppose.
You went over to the French shore, and what'd you do? Who went with you, and what was your mission?
Well, the mission was, there was I think 12 or 14 Rangers and 3 of us demolitionists and 3 CIC men, Central Corps Intelligence. They were to pick up 2 or 3 Frenchmen that had worked on the underground, that they was afraid the Germans was breaking the code and afraid they were getting close to them. Now the secret part or who they was or what, I don't know. All my job was just to help get them there and get them back.
How long did that last?
We was on shore, well, it'll be 24 hours, I reckon.
And did you go over in a speedboat or something like that, or
Famous submarine.
with what?
On a submarine.
On a submarine. And landed there. How do you get us? Was there a dock there or a submarine?
Oh, you've seen picture shows. They surface about 3 miles out, just come up water level, and
Get out.
you crawl out of that hole and blow your rubber boats up and just paddle away.
Where did you land? Whereabouts in France was it?
It really was between, I can't tell you the city now, because there wasn't no city there. It was a village. Somewhere between the Havre where they landed and the Omaha Beach. I forget what that little area is called in there. But the French underground was pretty strong on the inside, and they got 2 of them.
They brought 2 of them back.
Brought 2 back.
They got back in the submarine and came back to. Did everybody get back?
Yes.
You all got back.
Also picked up a German colonel, which was extra.
He wanted to come?
No,
You just
we
captured.
run into a group of them and just happened to capture him. He wasn't intended to pick up any.
And I expect he protested then coming.
Well, yes, but walk into him face to face. No, it was a surprise we run into him even, but we skirted this little village and they had a little battalion headquarters there. Just as an extra.
Surprised you didn't get the whole German army on top of it.
Well, it stirred up a little, but we got out of there.
Now, your mission was accomplished. You came back, and then you had your maneuvers going around on landing craft, and then what happened after that?
They brought, at Weymouth Harbor, they brought all these hundreds of landing craft, and LSTs began to congregate from up around northern, and they filled them harbors full, and I, all this time, was assigned to a LCT, which will carry about 120 or 130 men, or 60 tons of cargo. So they assigned us to one, and we loaded our heavy equipment on it and took it back out, and they put 4 of them to a bellboy. And it just looked like miles and miles of solid landing craft.
Did the Germans spot all that?
Did all this time, I don't know whether you was ever in England, there was enough balloons there that they used to say if they cut the balloons, the island would sink. There were thousands and thousands of aerial balloons, and somehow or other, they never got into these harbors too much. Once in a while a fighter would drop down through, but very few bombers got in. And during this time they called us all in and decided our casualty was going to be higher than they estimated, and they give us 20 or 50% overstrength, which they assigned them by numbers and code to each unit. And they put them, as the invasion started, and they put those extra on one boat. And after we got in, why we could, as we'd lose men, why...
Have replacements come in.
Yeah.
Now, tell us about, we're getting up to D-Day, and what do you remember the period just before D-Day? What did you do?
I was the last one of my company to go to the staging areas, or the concentration camps, as we call them. As I said, we had to load the machinery and get her, each one went on different landing craft. And then they put us in these staging areas, which for the assault forces, which was elements of 1st Division, 29th Division, and several units put in, and they give us our last instructions. And
For those that, those were written instructions, were they?
oh yeah, each group had written
Had orders.
orders.
Mm-hmm.
Right. On May, I think it was the 29th, those on LCTs, which is a slow boat, loaded on. And I don't know whether you read or heard or remembered about the storm. We was to leave, and did leave, June the 2nd.
And then a storm came up and
And the storm came up, and there was about 7,000 or 8,000 of us, I guess. Got halfway across, and they called us back. And that's when I'll vary a few days, a day or two here.
Now, when you say they called us back, how'd you find out? They called you back, you're halfway across the English Channel?
Well, it was the Navy.
By radio?
Radio.
Uh-huh.
These landing craft, if you're in the Navy, the LCT was the next size, bigger than the, 5 knots an hour, about 6 knots, about as fast as they go. 4, you're on there a heck of a long while. So, brought us back in that storm, and I didn't think we was going to get back in. That English Channel is not such big waves, but they're close, choppy waves. You're sitting on a cork on a landing craft. Sick, thrown up, and wet.
Had a lot of equipment out there with you?
Okay, on my platoon, or on my landing craft, I had a cap with all my grab hooks to pull out the big gates. 2 men, and an AC wagon, which is a track vehicle, had 10 ton of TNT on it. And a company of infantry boys out of the 29th Division, and they had a self-propelled 105 gun, and on the other side back in to level the weight up. And then the landing craft got about 4-foot sides on it.
What was that TNT? That's pretty volatile stuff. What do you TNT? What did you use that for?
Well, it was extra, supposedly, to blow out the gates and the big angle arms that was sitting there.
All right. Now, so you went out first on a dry run, and you came back to the English side, and then you started out when?
We started out June the 5th on the actual go. It was so confusing and so much I just don't remember the actual hours, but we had to start 8 hours before the actual big stuff left on account of we were so slow. I'll tell you something that kind of gets you. Those LCTs has got a little upper deck. And on top of that, there's a radio antenna sticked up there and painted white, and it looked like a white cross. When we got started, I could look back and look what a row of white crosses following me. You could look that direction, you could look that direction.
Okay. Tell us now about You approached the shore, and I expect you were sick. Again, sick and wet.
Like these boys this last week, the assault force is wore out before it ever gets there, and I don't see how they ever fight a battle, but that's the way it is. Yeah, we didn't have but that one night's rest and come back out. And the LCT I was on, it was the command ship of this group 11. When daylight come, we got, they say the big ships docked 10 miles at sea, I don't know. But we was circling inside. And really, I wasn't supposed to go in until 8:30. And we hadn't started till...
Were you in command of this one LCT?
No.
Who was calling the shots?
The Navy man.
Oh,
Navy.
okay.
Navy runs the LCTs.
Okay.
Well, we peeled off and started in.
Now, when you peel off and start in, what do you do? Let down the front of the...
No.
What do you do?
They was circling. He understands what I mean. They was circling. There were 4 groups of them. And just when I happened to be the leader, or whatever you call it, of the group, just quit turning and started in, and then the rest of them followed. So,
Oh, you mean the LCTs?
yeah, on these.
Okay. And you started in, and then what happened? You have to get out in the water, I suppose.
They started hitting us before. Sorry.
Why don't we break a little bit? Tell us about hitting the beach and getting off the craft and going up.
Well,
Tell us first of all, Bob, about what was the terrain like that you were facing as you came in there?
well, it was hard to tell till you got within half a mile of it. They had
Were you in the dark when you first?
no, it had come daylight, but they put up a smoke screen, and it was just fading away and against the background.
I mean, the Germans put up a smoke.
No, we did.
Oh, you did.
They had they fired smoke in, but it didn't last very long. You come through that, and there it was.
There it was. What was it like?
Well, really, at a distance, it looked like going towards the Rocky Mountains when you go there. I mean, in the distance, the hills, and as you got closer, like, of course, it wasn't. I wouldn't know how high that hills are. There was a cliff on the east and west end where their big guns were cemented in. And they had a few emplacements down on the level, but most of them, this hill went back before it come out. I mean, it's hard to describe it. It was, I reckon, 250, 300 foot big knob off in the distance.
Mm-hmm. How soon before you landed did the shooting start?
Well, as I started to say a while ago, we must have been we was the first one off of this group headed in, which would make it look like a larger craft. They started hitting around us a mile out, I suppose.
There's artillery or?
Artillery.
Uh-huh.
No, mortar couldn't get that far. It was artillery. And of course, them beaches are all quadded in, and from their practice, they knew where to lay them.
They had mines out there.
Well, this was out before you got into the mine area. They, 3 different times they hit the bow of it.
The bow of your landing craft?
Yeah, which is that heavy gate they let down.
Mm-hmm.
And before we got clear in, there was 10 or 12 of the infantrymen down, and shrapnel got them. But during this time, back up just a little, before we started in, they split every one of our outfit up. Each command, like I was platoon sergeant, they had 2 back there would take my place. Each group that come in had 2 backups that take your place. And unbeknownst to me, he'd been in, they brought him up along beside just before we got there. We had the second in command of the battalion on board, and tell you the truth, I was just sitting on top of this TNT with
Oh boy.
these 2. Well, that's the best way to go. You wouldn't know what happened. And he'd come out of the hole. He'd of this little landing craft, and he hollered down. He said, "Sergeant, why don't you come up and stand with me, and you're going to see some history here." I didn't really want to get that high in the air, but I knew his problem. He was by himself. Just before we got in, this commander of this little landing craft was up there with his controls, and he said, "I've got a feeling." And he stopped and put that thing in reverse, and we just went over about 100 foot. During this time, these other landing craft had caught up, and we started in side by side. And that landing craft that took our place hit a marine mine.
Oh boy.
It wasn't like explosives that I was used to. It lifted that in slow motion. I remember just watching it go up, and it turned over in the air, and men and equipment just went that way. But I had other things on my mind coming up, and to last the explosive. But that one heavy explosive combined is quick, but that was just like slow motion on your camera. Once in a while that happens.
Yeah.
Just lifted that, and I remember just watching it go up.
And everybody's
Everybody
scattered all over the top of the...
It was 150 foot in the air before it turned over, I reckon.
How many men were on board that?
Mostly men, possibly 150.
Okay, bring us up, take us forward, and what happened?
Well, we was lucky enough this landing craft got to clear in. We rolled some of them spikes and went like that, but we got clear in within 200 foot of the edge of the water. And infantry, of course, as soon as they let it down, when the infantry went out and the self-propelled, and we followed out with our cat and our TNT.
Were you were in water though?
About 4 foot of water.
Uh-huh.
About 4 foot of water.
Uh-huh. You waded in, did you?
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
But back to modern day warfare, the assault force they fixed up with anti-chemical clothes for gas, and we couldn't get out of them soon enough. They had paraffin in them. You couldn't sweat in them, or you couldn't get wet in them if you've been around it. First thing we did was get out of that.
As soon as you hit the shore.
Right.
Okay, you're on the shore now. Then Did everybody make it, or beside those 10 guys that got hit?
Everybody out of this group, far as I know, got to the dune line.
Uh-huh.
We didn't. We got within 10 foot of it and had to unhook that. There wasn't no other vehicles on the beach yet. And during this time, this had begun to build so fast. There's a landing craft landing out at 3/4 of a mile or in, and we couldn't. It was just so fierce that as soon as they went over the dune line, they didn't make it. And when they began to land this stuff, it built up on the beach, men and material.
Now, you're speaking about a dune line. Is that, what do you...
Have you been in Florida?
Yeah. Oh, I see, like...
But the dune line there is not sand. It's 1.5 inch rock pushed up.
Pushed up.
And it was about 9 or 10 foot high, and it's just like washed rock. Those tanks that get on them just stand on end.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it ended up, rather than us working on mines momentarily, during this time, about 9 o'clock, one of my other cats had come in. We spent a little time knocking holes, driveways through that dune line.
Yeah, you did get your cat working though, and
We had altogether that day, we landed 5 cats, and there wasn't one of them got put out of commission until that night.
mm-hmm.
We got to working.
And did they have a plows on the front, or what did they
Had
blade on the front?
Dozer blade and cables with hooks that you'd like to get off 50 or 60 foot before you pull them gates down, because the initial guys like us through just tore them down regardless, but most of them were mined underneath and they blow up. So we learned through practice to use a 50 or 60 foot cable.
Now, gates you're talking about, what gates?
They were steel gates, 9 foot high and 16 to 20 foot long.
How long a seawall?
Yeah, out at the 300 foot out in the water with a little tide hanging like that.
300 feet out in order of gates.
Yeah, I had these gates and then these big steel cross arms, like jacks.
Now those are put out there by the Germans?
Oh yeah, yeah.
The water's rather shallow then, where those are.
Well, yeah, they'd run from 3 foot of water clear out to 20 foot of water. See, they had to compensate for high and low tide.
Mm-hmm. Did you go in at high tide or low tide, or what was it?
It was at 5 minutes past, they said, 5 minutes past high tide. That's when the first infantry was supposed to have got over.
But you got through those gates, through the use of those cables that you had.
Well, we just by luck. The first assault group gets through just by luck.
Mm-hmm.
We got in and then later on began to try to make paths through, but they got to sending in so much and it got so big that
You were sitting
got out of proportion now. In fact, I was just a little bit apprehensive. At 10:30 or 10:45, they quit landing them at Omaha. Read your history, and And I was a little bit leery. That fleet picked up and went back out to sea. And they never come back in till about 2 o'clock. But during this time, the commanding general of the 1st Division kind of got to himself. He landed there.
Who was that?
Can't tell his name now, but his second in command, which was a Roosevelt, got killed right beside me there, a 1-star. But they finally got him off the beach and up over the hill rolling. Now during this time the Rangers had crawled up on the West Beach and they got up on top.
Tell us the difference between your outfit and the Rangers. You were got about the same mission, haven't you?
In a sense, only they were just outright specialist in infantry, really. We did a little training at the White Cliffs with them, and they used their mortar hooks to blow their hooks up and crawl up the cliffs. No, we didn't have to do any of that. But they were mainly specialists in infantry. Close work.
Yeah. Well, now we've gotten ashore. Can you pull us through that and tell us what happened after you plowed your way through some of those dunes, and what happened then?
Well, while everybody was laying, we were trying to make paths. See, from the dune line on up to the hills was, I reckon, about 40 acres or 50 there. It was mine solid for anti-personnel mine. But we was mainly wanting to get the part of the beach opened for them to get in. By evening, most of our men had got in. And by evening was when we got to doing our best work of clearing out. But there were so many were wounded, and they couldn't take care of the wounded, couldn't get the wounded back out. We just had to make paths through them.
You had to make paths through the wounded?
Yep.
Did you, was there, were the medics on the beach with you?
Yes, but all this confusion, there just wasn't enough to go around. There were just, by the middle afternoon, there were so many men coming in, really walking over each other after they got past the dune line. There's no way of taking care of the wounded.
Yeah, where was the artillery, the German artillery?
On the cliffs, and they had underground built clear around the hill, underground.
Trenches?
Well, it was buried from the inside out. They entered them a couple miles back.
Oh.
And but most of their, other than on the big ends, they're back about 3 miles, they had a permanent gun set.
Now these wounded, were they getting hit by artillery or by landmines? Both, maybe.
And mortar, everything, yeah. They always said, now the reason they put them white signs on us, and we didn't know, was too dumb to know at the time because we hadn't been through it. The first thing you want to do is get off of the beach and get inland, and so we had to stay there, and our uniforms were marked with those so that if any one of us decided to go inland to get out of it, why, they'd send you back, supposedly.
Mhm. Well, that was a special, your special mark.
Right.
Oh.
It had a blue background with a yellow anchor and the engineer tassel on it.
Mhm. Picture of Fort Belvoir. Okay. Now, you say that that there were a lot of people being wounded. Any of your buddies get it?
The two I brought in never got a scratch, and I didn't either, only right after we landed. We had an artillery shell go through that 10-ton of TNT, come out the side. They stripped the rifle out of my hand. Went over there about 20 foot and blew the squad of men to pieces. But it didn't blow that TNT, and it didn't explode coming through.
Went clear through the TNT
Sure it is.
and left a hole in it?
Yes.
I'll be darned.
So help me.
I thought that TNT was very highly explosive and
Well,
very unstable.
TNT is pretty stable. Now the C2 and C1 and C2 that we used, the putty is unstable.
Now, about, are we getting toward nightfall now?
Yes, really, yeah.
And what happened after dark? Did things kind of quiet down? Were more people coming in, or?
There are more people. It never stopped. I had just took a moment, got up and stood up on that dune line, and it just was solid landing crafts coming in. You just couldn't imagine. They claimed, what was it? 24 hours, they put 60,000 men on there.
That
I think-
Omaha Beach
yeah.
alone?
But it's hard to do. The assault force is the same as the others after it gets started. You can't tell them apart, but the group that practices like we did is initially to get on the beach, and then the other.
Were there German planes flying overhead?
Not too many.
What about Allied planes? Did you see them?
Oh yeah. I don't know whether Doc Kirkley mentioned it, but the day before the invasion, they had something like 3,000 planes, bombers, fighters in the air, going and coming. Sometime between midnight and D-Day morning, we had orders to shoot down or shoot at any plane that didn't have 3 stripes written, painted on the wing. Sometime between 12 o'clock at night and 6 o'clock that morning, they had painted 3 stripes on each plane. Every plane in Europe for identification.
All right, we're getting toward nightfall now, and then what happened? Did you get to bed down that night?
No,
What'd you do?
just adrenaline keeps you going. You just kept working it.
You kept working. Were you still using your cat?
Cat, and we got, sometimes you'd have to crawl up to unwire a mine that had a tripwire on it.
How could you see these mines? Was this
Field. Mine detectors. Every time I see a man hunting money out here, I'd like to stuff that down his throat.
Oh,
If you've ever been around, which I didn't, the men did, mine detector, your life depending on a flashlight battery to save you. And of course, 45 years ago, they weren't near as good as these you got now. Of course, a mine detector would, the Germans, that was, the 40s when plastic started coming in, the anti-personnel mines, which was for soldiers, it's the quarter-pound mine, it was all plastic. You had to probe for them.
But these were metal, so that they
These were metal heavy.
able to detect them with the...
Yeah.
All right, getting dark, and you were still out there running your camp. Were you running the camp?
No, I had other cats coming in. I was just in charge of the machinery and one platoon of men. And they didn't all get together till really that night. Couldn't, as I said, we come in 2 or 3 at a time on each landing craft so that they wouldn't bust up the whole battalion. We never really got together as a formal unit till about dusk that night.
Now, where nightfall has come and you go on working, you go on doing your job.
We never stopped.
And when did the morning came, you're still working?
Right.
When did you first get to sleep after that? And what did you...
Till they began to topple over from lack of sleep, 3rd and 4th day.
The men began to topple over?
Oh yeah, you can go so long, and then later on, which we probably won't talk about, but you can take a man running so long without sleep. But if he ever lays down and he goes to sleep, it'll be 6 hours before you can move him.
When did they first begin to topple over?
3rd day.
3rd day.
3rd day.
Did they topple over right there on the...
Well, you could tell when they'd go on, and by that time they had enough reinforcements in. Some of them was taking over our job of cleaning the dune line while we'd send the one squad at a time over to sleep, rest.
Where were the rest?
Dig a hole.
Dig a hole on the beach. Now, you were still a buck sergeant?
No, I was platoon sergeant.
Platoon sergeant, okay. And did a promotion come along here somewhere? Or were you still platoon sergeant?
I was still platoon sergeant when this promotion come. As I said, a little bit of sleep. If you was in charge of anything, you didn't get much sleep, but just enough to keep you alive. Seemed to me like it was the 4th or 5th day. The only officer we had left that was moving was our company commander. And they'd asked me the day before, and I didn't know. And the engineer officers kind of hard to come by, so kind of looking after the men, and the colonel come down through there and said, "This is it. You got a pair of bars right now."
Gave it to you right there? Second lieutenant.
2nd lieutenant.
You were still in Omaha Beach.
Right.
Had they, by this time, breached the defenses up on the ridge?
Yes. Yes. They had got through, and the tanks began to go out. They had one road through. They just looked like a cattle stampede when they got that road. They were just solid tanks and trucks going out this one road, which left these flanks here with the Germans still operated, but they put a battalion of infantry down there with machine guns just to keep them in their holes. And we cleaned them out 5th or 6th day. Time there for a while, kind of.
So you got the beach cleaned out, and then you moved up over the top.
Well, it took days and days to get all the beach cleaned, because Beach was, after they got in and this settled, was where they was bringing all the freight through. There was an engineer, I forget what they called him, that put up a set of docks way out there and where they're going to run ships right up to it. But the big storm on the 10th day, and one of them big storms did hit and tore it out.
So they cleared out that artillery that had been shooting?
Yeah, they got dead.
Okay, what happened then? You were still down on the beach for a long time then, but what happened then?
Everything got better. Everything got better. We was out of the serious part of it. Only every day somebody was getting on a mine that we'd missed. But as far as the artillery and infantry, why, it got clear away from it. We stayed there, as I said, we specialists, we stayed there 2 months and put up a bunch of cranes, and they unloaded, I think they said 20 million tons of stuff over that beach in 6 weeks. We had, later on after we got cleared up, we had attached to us was these ducks, hauled freight in with ducks, which can run on land or on sea. And they would go out there. They brought them ships in closer, and they just cargo net would load into them. They bring it in and unload it.
As you were saying, you were there about 10 weeks, is that right?
Yeah.
And what did you do then? Did they, by that time I expect they'd gotten some tents in there for you?
Oh yeah. We got to sleep in our pup tents or set up. We had a few tents we set up, but mostly pup tents.
And what happened after the 10 weeks?
Well, I ought to tell it. They dressed us up and put us back in the Army. It was all clean clothes. They sent us to Cherbourg. They had 60,000 German prisoners down there. And
that's about as bad as the Persian Gulf thing right now.
They had 60,000 German prisoners down there that had signed up to work, and they had 36 derricks, cranes at Cherbourg to unload ships as they come in. Well, they had secondary troops guarding the prisoners, and they was loading out 100 ton of material every 24 hours, so they decided they wanted to show the Army, and they sent us down there all dressed up. And we was to work them, and the first 24 hours we sent out 12,000 tons from 100 that we put them to work. That's all I'll say on that.
All right. Did you stay there the rest of the war then?
No. This is getting close to the 1st of December, and the outfit moved up to where the Battle of the Bulge started.
Perkin Forest?
Up in there, and I and 3 fellows were left there on a detail, and I got a little sick and took off for a couple of days. They put me in the infirmary, and they detached me from my outfit. I had to go up to the replacement center then and to another outfit. And I just like losing your family.
Where were you when you became detached?
At Cherbourg.
Still at Cherbourg.
Well, I went up Ripple Dipple in Belgium and went to a bridge company. went out on the line with the 3rd Army down south and got with them just in time to make that 150-mile drive back north to the breakthrough.
You were with the
3rd Army. There.
3rd Army. Patton's outfit?
Yeah.
And what was your function there? What did you do? Were you still heavy equipment?
No, at Bailey Bridge. That's where the engineers built the bridge out over the river ahead of the infantry.
Did you get to build any bridges?
Oh, yes.
How many bridges did you build, or where'd you build them?
The river's names I've lost. The biggest was on the Duran River at the town of Duran. At one time we put up 13 bridges in 13 days.
Now, you said Bailey Bridge, is that what you said? Tell us what a Bailey Bridge is.
Well, the Bailey Bridge is...
Do we have any of those in Montgomery County?
No, sir. They're 10-foot panels, 4 foot high with pins in them. You can build them all on one side of your stream if you got the measurements. Put them on rollers and roll them out. You put a skeleton on the front of it. You got a figure weight from the center mounts. I could build a 150-foot bridge that'll hold 80 ton, and with that group we could put it up in 5 hours and build her on one side and push her out till it drops on the other side. As you put one on, after you get it over, you got a crew over here taking off.
But it's got piles. It has piles?
No, you just got panels, 10-foot panels.
Panels.
With big 3-inch pins.
How's it different from a pontoon bridge like we've seen?
Oh, a lot different. Now you can put, we put some of them on a pontoon, but it's a steel bridge like the Sugar Creek Bridge down here on 136 knocked down. You could bridge it with it, one side.
Now you were moving north with the 3rd Army.
At that time I was telling you about.
Did you see some of the action at the in the Bulge? You know, Marion Cooper from Crowersville here was in the Battle of the Bulge.
Yes, and I think Marion got wounded. I ended up putting the Bailey Bridge on the Remagen Bridge. They dropped the...
Oh, when they rebuilt the Remagen?
Well, when we took the Remagen Bridge, the Germans tried to bomb it, and they dropped a couple of duds right through the entrance on our side and took the flooring out. And, I was about 3 miles from there, and old General Hogue himself caught me. He said, "Get up there and put a Bailey over it." And we got it over that night. The Remagen Bridge was a railroad bridge.
I remember.
2 lanes wide.
Did they use the Remagen Bridge to cover that over and use it for taking troops across?
They did for, I think 6 or 7 days. The 10th day it just fell in. It had been weakened from, some of the explosives went off when the Germans went to blow it. Some of the explosions went off and cut part of it.
Were you there while they were using that Remagen Bridge then?
Yes, I had sat up there with my field glasses about 2 miles away from there and watched the Germans going over it. Your friend that you're talking about was with the 9th Division. They come down from the north and finally cut him off.
Marion Cooper.
Marion Cooper, I think. I have never talked to Marion about it.
Yeah. You know, before we get away from it, you've got a picture in your pocket. Why don't you take that out and tell us what that is? Why don't you, I don't know whether we can see that or not. You think you can zero in on that and get it? Why don't you explain what that is?
Well, this picture is a copy of the original, of course, that they used to show on television of D-Day. I don't know whether you can see it. This man right down there with the white hook on his hat is one of us. Now, I don't know who he was, but there was personally, and that is the part of the dune line. See them rocks instead of sand? That's rock.
The dune line right there. Now, are you in the picture?
No, no.
Where are you if you go?
I'm right back of the man that took the picture. On the leeward side.
And what are they doing here in this picture?
Those boys, the landing craft had got sunk way out there, and they had swim in and floated in. And these here was pulling them in out of the surf.
Well, I kind of went back on that because you're on the beach there, but now you've got us down to the Remagen Bridge, and tell us about what happened then. How did you said you were about 2 miles away and you could see the Germans, through your glasses you could see the Germans crossing the bridge.
I was on the lower side of our side of the bridge coming up, and I think it was the 4th Armored Division was using the road. We pulled off. We were non-combat at that time. We pulled off to let the tanks through. And as it pulled off, I was up on a knob about 2 miles back, and I could see the whole bridge. I could see the 9th Division moving through the town of Remagen, and I knew it was just a matter of minutes before they cut that in two. They had entrapped one of the German armies back in there, and they were cutting it off. Now, the reason the bridge wasn't blown, the German general on the other side was trying to retrieve all the troops he could, and he just waited too long.
And they just got across, and
that 9th Division come down, and this 4th Armored Division come up. This road just runs along the river like up here at Lafayette, and he just cut them off. And, when the Germans went to blow the bridge, some of the cables, the wiring had got tangled. Wasn't too much of the charge went off.
Now you were there. Did you see any of when the American or the Allied tanks got near, they began to shoot? Did they? Began to fire?
Oh, sure.
Were they firing at that German army crossing there?
Sure, they tried to knock out what they could, of course, yeah. But, of course, they was in convoy, tail to tail, but half of the German army getting through had left some of the machinery and was just in troops. But in a matter of a few days then, after they cut it off, in this pocket they called, they give up.
They were going, the Germans were going east, weren't they, across the Remagen? Was that
yes.
Right?
Well, yes.
Okay. All right, where did you go from Remagen? Did you go into town then, or you were in the town of Remagen?
We crossed the bridge the next day and went on inside, and I'm a little bit hazy over there because things had got to going so fast. By that time, the Germans were whipped, but they're still fighting. I mean, and everybody got a little cautious. Part of that through there is hazy to me. I can tell you where I ended up when the war is over. Well, I'd like to get to that.
Could you get us through the war?
Well, we hit the German Autobahns, which is like 74. There's the first ones that had
Autobahns, yeah. Interstates.
Their main thing, they blowed them like you've seen over here this last week, they blowed all the bridges. And for us to move much, where we put this Bailey Bridge over them things, and you could put a Bailey Bridge up at that time and not get anybody to shoot at you. I mean, it was began to get easy going. Yeah.
And they were getting out of there.
They were until you got them in a pocket. Yeah. And,
did you get shot at after that time?
well, my last worst experience was the day before the war was over. I don't know whether you read history or not, but part of the German SSers was trying to get back to Austria, up in the hills to the German hideout.
Garbage.
And of course, the little fellow like us didn't know what was really happening. Part of the Third Army was pushing that way, and I built a bridge on May the 6th. The war was over the 8th. May the 6th, I built a bridge across the Blue Danube at the little town of Landshut. And we had a little Firefly artillery there, and I lost them. The last casualty I had a boy killed out of my platoon that day, and I always wondered if we could have just waited 48 hours, he might be alive, but you can't figure.
Yeah.
Didn't know.
Were you still a 2nd Louis?
Yeah, I was a little bit independent. I didn't make not too many promotions. I wasn't working for promotion.
You're the first guy I've seen that just admits he went AWOL on purpose.
Well, it was only 24 hours that I got to see that woman going to.
Did you have many people killed in your outfit? Maybe I should say, did you have many casualties in your outfit?
I'm going to say this. No. I don't know how or why or not. I don't think there was over 12 or 14 actually killed. But remember what I said to start with, they give us 50% for casualties and didn't think that was enough, and give us 100 for the day before we started. We had that many casualties.
That had to drop out.
Yeah.
Were they sent back to England or?
Back to the hospitals. And like what happened to me down there at Sherbrooke, when they're sent back,
They go to
they don't, when they get well and they bring them back up, they don't come back to this outfit because we've already filled up, see?
Yeah. Now, one thing that Marion Kirtley mentioned seeing some of these Holocaust people. Did you see any of that? Any of the from the concentration camps?
I've seen enough of one, and I can't even tell you which one it was now. That you better believe what you heard.
Yeah, was it right there?
Right there. Them ingenious so-and-so, they have their pile of gold teeth, bones. They're saving everything.
Did you see any of these people with the striped uniforms?
They had moved most of them out. When I got to this camp, just going through, was convoying through to another location. When I got there, which was 4 or 5 days later, they had what you call cleaned things up and got it halfway presentable.
All right, now you were, the last thing, you were building a bridge across the Danube River. The war was coming to a close. You lost a man there just 2 days before. And was that from
Artillery.
Artillery.
German artillery.
What did you, where were you on the VE Day then?
We'd moved on in about 15 mile, I guess. Not very far.
Moved on in to where?
Well, on inside there from
Inside Germany?
Inside Austria.
And were you, when VE Day came, what'd you do next?
Well, I'm not a drinking man, but I throwed the biggest one you ever heard of. Along with everybody in my platoon, every man I had under me.
Did you drink that Austrian and German beer?
Anything that was passed around till we passed out.
And you got orders, I suppose, you stayed there, I would guess, right after.
Well, I'm kind of like the old soldier, I was feeling pretty good, and we got orders all at once to truck back to Nuremberg. You've heard about the Nuremberg trials.
Yes.
Maybe you've been there. To police the place. We was there about 2 weeks, and they began to send these boys to camps, cigarette camps they call them, discharging. Well, I'd been in Alaska, as I said, and down here, and I was waiting, and my number was pretty darn high compared to a lot of it.
You've been overseas twice.
But all at once, we got orders to go to Marseille. With all our equipment. Well, these people that was going to these camps dumped their equipment. And all at once we get started, headed for Marseille, and we got down there and we...
Japan, here we come.
That's what they said, and then we throwed another. But we sat there, ship was supposed to come in on a Tuesday, and we used to go by the way of Panama Canal, and things got better over there. And by the end of the week, they rescinded that order. We was there about 10 days as a unit, and all at once they found my number with all them points on it. And I was the first one in this company I was in to head home. That's it.
How did you get home?
Well, come out tomorrow, Mediterranean.
You know what ship it was, do you remember?
It was a Liberty, and we hit a typhoon, and I thought after all this, they're going to drown me, but they didn't. I'm sure I got a picture of that old bridge at home, but I can't tell you the name of it now.
Where'd you land?
New York City, Pier 88, famous pier.
And you telephoned your wife first thing you got there?
As soon as I got to camp, I did. But we stayed up all night. They had to, what do you call it? They had to blow the pipes out of the ship out there. We sat and we come past the Statue of Liberty, 2:30 in the morning. And there wasn't a soul on that boat asleep.
I'll bet.
Some of the first electric lights we'd seen for 2 years. Great big, I reckon, 20-foot letters along the line there. They'd welcome all.
Did you see the Statue of Liberty? Was it moonlight or what?
Oh boy, yeah, they had it lit up.
We didn't, when we were talking about all your, what kind of quarters did you have and what kind of meals did you have when you were over there? A little bit different when after you got to be a commissioned officer, but...
Not necessarily. If you're out on the punch line, you don't get much to eat. Cracker Jack boxes is what you got. K rations, which is
keeps you alive.
Keeps you alive. That's about all. Yeah, your calories was there, but it wasn't you got to where you wouldn't eat but one a day.
Did you lose some weight while you were?
Yes, there was a period there from about the bulge time on, and I lost about 30 pounds.
What did you weigh then?
About 100, ended up, I think, weighing about 142 or 3 pounds.
Mm-hmm. And what had you been?
About 160, 65.
You were pretty much all muscle, I expect, by that time.
Well, yeah.
Your sleeping quarters, was it mostly in pup tents, or did you get to go into homes or barns? Or
Scrounging around, the best place was to sleep in a barn, really. You had a little feeling. I have slept in houses, especially if the families had moved out. The best place really is out in the open with a haystack. But the Germans knew that too. They'd let you get about half asleep and then they'd fire one at it, or we would to theirs. So sometimes you didn't sleep the full night, but believe it or not, you don't believe it, but a haystack's the best place to sleep.
I bet it is. Lots of warmth and soft.
Mm-hmm. But most generally you dug a hole.
Dug a hole.
Yeah.
You had your little spade with you as part of your equipment.
Yeah, you never lost that.
Mm-hmm. Now you got, by this time, you did not have any children?
Oh, no. No.
It was just your wife?
Just the one.
And you got a hold of your wife after you hit New York?
I called her on the
Did you
telephone.
go to Camp Dix, or where'd you go?
We went to Camp Dix, but we wasn't there. It wasn't full. It didn't take long to, I think 6 hours later, I was on a train for Camp Atterbury.
Your wife came down there to meet you?
No. I walked out of that camp and come home myself.
Oh.
I walked in down there at Atterbury, and there was a colonel out of the 101st Airborne that I'd known, and he was when he made the drop over there, he was a second lieutenant. And being we had boots on alike and signal on, and he was from Lexington, Kentucky. Drove my things down, and we helloed each other, you know. He said, "How far you gotta go?" And I said, "Just about 20, 30 miles on the other side of Crawfordville." And he said, "Why don't you get your fanny out of here if you want to see your wife?" And I said, "There's nobody going to court-martial you to do anything." And I said, "I believe it will." I went out there and stepped out and come a bus around that corner, and I said, "You going to Indianapolis?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm home that night." So she drove me back the next day, and it took 2 days to get my discharge. But
Did you make any good friends when you were in the service that you still in contact with?
These fellows we landed with, we have a reunion every year.
That's okay. Where do you reunion?
I hosted it this year over Speedway at Indianapolis.
How many of them are there?
Well, there's several, but in my whole unit, the ones I had, every one of them's dead now. But you've made the acquaintance with all the others. We've had 2 reunions in Denver. Had 1 in Colorado Springs. We've had 2 at Dallas. We've had 2 in South Carolina. We've had 2 in Indiana. And in Michigan, in New York, and Connecticut.
Some of the best friends you ever had, weren't they? What have you done since the war? What, been farming ever since?
Worked in the gravel pit in the plant. We had a truck, county and city bought most of their gravel there at the time. And my father owned the place where Ray Bestis is now, and the one back of it. And we farmed some, and all at once, with respect, I got tired of the public. I moved out there on 55, kind of away from things. And I've done very well. I'm not bragging, I don't mean that. No. Got 300 acres I've paid off years and years ago, and I educated 3 children. I got investments in 3 banks, and I'm completely happy with myself. I may be a farmer, but that's the way I like it.
No, that's great.
And I've been very fortunate. I swore when I come back, I worked day and night. I don't know whether Claire come here yet or not. And before I was 40, I wouldn't owe a man a cent, and I don't. But it's been kind of hard on me. I've had a heart spell or 2.
Well, I think
And I've had a nice wife.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I think that's been a pretty satisfying life.
Yes.
I think we'll just close it right there at that point.
Well,
unless you've got something
no,
else to say.
okay. I'll be honest. When he called me,